It was just before 4 a.m. when the call came in. A passing trucker on the overnight route from Spokane noticed smoke curling in the distance as he crossed the overpass near Bellevue. He slowed. Something was wrong. What he saw from his elevated vantage point stopped his breath cold. A white sports car, upside down in a landscaped median, the rear end still faintly smoldering, its roof flattened into the shape of an empty can. The dispatcher's voice on the 911 call was steady. One vehicle, major damage. Possible fire. Send medical and fire now. By 4:30 a.m., first responders had arrived at the intersection of 108th Avenue and State Route 520. The quiet of the early morning was broken by the hiss of fire hoses, the flashing blue and red lights of patrol cars, and the low, muffled commands of firefighters working in tandem. Inside the mangled Porsche 911 Carrera S, 2 bodies were found. One was clearly lifeless, slumped unnaturally in the passenger seat, held in only by a tattered seatbelt. The other was breathing, barely. A young woman, bloodied and semi-conscious, pinned by the twisted frame of the driver's seat. Her name, they would later learn, was Madeline Reyes. She was 26 years old. A data engineer working remotely for a mid-sized tech company based in Seattle. No criminal history, no outstanding warrants, no reason for suspicion, at least not yet. The man next to her, dead on impact, was Joshua Miller, 27. A rising AI specialist at a fast-growing startup. The two were known among their peers as quiet, career-focused professionals. No drugs, no drama. Just 2 young people in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or so it seemed. What followed in the next 3 weeks would unravel everything. Reputations, timelines, and the very fabric of what looked like a tragic accident. By the end of it, one of them would be buried, the other vanished. A scene that spoke for itself. The car was traveling northbound when it lost control. Investigators later traced over 160 feet of skid marks on the asphalt, long, desperate lines leading toward a shattered concrete barrier, followed by a brutal aerial trajectory across a narrow reservoir. The car had flipped multiple times, according to crash analysts, before coming to rest upside down near a planter on the east side of Route 520. The area wasn't known for accidents. The road was well lit, the pavement dry, and weather conditions that night had been clear. No rain. No fog. Visibility was near perfect. The only anomaly? Based on impact analysis and traffic camera footage, the Porsche had been clocked at over 100 miles per hour, 160 kilometers per hour, before losing traction. That was more than 3 times the legal limit for that zone. Reckless. Irresponsible. And in this case, fatal. But that still didn't explain why someone like Madeline Reyes, a seemingly reserved and responsible engineer with no history of reckless behavior, had been driving a $130,000 Porsche through downtown Bellevue at race car speed. Nor did it explain why there was alcohol on her breath, as noted by a paramedic named Bill Kessler, who administered oxygen to her at the scene. She didn't say anything. Just groaned. But the smell? You couldn't miss it, Kessler would later recall. The first red flags. By 6 a.m., Madeline had been transported to Harborview Medical Center, a regional trauma facility in Seattle. She was admitted with a cervical collar, multiple contusions, a fractured wrist, and a suspected concussion. Her blood was drawn under warrant. Toxicology pending. Meanwhile, the body of Joshua Miller was taken to the King County Medical Examiner's office. What began as a fatal DUI case started to evolve into something else. When officers contacted Madeline's emergency contacts, there was no immediate family listed. Only a single Seattle apartment address and a work email. No partner. No spouse. It was only days later, when colleagues of Joshua began posting, "Where is Josh?" online, that his identity was confirmed, not by the driver, but through his employer. Madeline had said nothing. Not to EMTs. Not to detectives. And definitely not to Joshua's family. When his parents in Ohio were finally reached by an HR officer at the startup where Joshua worked, they were confused. They hadn't heard anything. Not from Madeline. Not from anyone. Their last text exchange with Josh was 2 nights earlier, something about getting sushi in Bellevue. Now their son was dead. A missing piece. Detectives were puzzled by the silence. Why hadn't the driver disclosed the identity of her passenger? It wasn't just unusual, it was borderline obstruction. But they gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was trauma. Maybe she was confused. Maybe she was scared. Madeline was given time. Time to recover. Time to process. Time that, as it turned out, she would use differently. Because just 9 days after the crash, before any formal charges were filed, she disappeared. Discharged from Harborview on medical advisement, Madeline Reyes left no forwarding address. Her phone went dark. Her social media profiles, private. Her name? Absent from every known Seattle area database. She was gone. And yet, there were footprints, digital ones. A transaction trail on WeChat showing large currency exchanges from USD to ARS. A series of deleted posts that had once shown her sipping tea at home, post-crash, in perfect calm. And finally, a border exit log. Not from the United States, but from Canada. Someone had driven her from Seattle to Vancouver, quietly and without suspicion. From there, she'd boarded a plane bound for Buenos Aires, Argentina. The trail went cold. And this was only the beginning. Joshua Miller wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't the kind of man people Googled. There were no headlines bearing his name before the crash, no viral posts, no controversies. But in the days following his death, his absence became louder than most lives ever get to be. His parents, Sandra and Michael Miller, were still asleep in their home in Dayton, Ohio, when the HR department of Novix AI called. It was 5 days after the crash. They were told, gently but with clinical finality, that their son had died in a vehicle accident in Washington state. Their voices caught in disbelief. "Is this a mistake?" Sandra asked instinctively. "He just texted me a few days ago. He said he was staying in with someone for dinner." There was a pause on the line. No one from the police had contacted them. No hospital. No coroner. Just the company where Josh worked, because no one else even knew who he was, except for the woman who had been driving that car. And she said nothing. Who was Joshua Miller? Josh was the kind of person people liked but didn't notice right away. Quiet, maybe a little too quiet in meetings. He had a way of thinking before he spoke, an instinct his professors at Carnegie Mellon used to praise. Not the first to raise his hand, one of them once wrote in a letter of recommendation, but the one you want to listen to when he finally does. He graduated near the top of his class with a specialization in machine learning and neural systems. After a brief stint in Chicago, he moved west for a job at Novix AI, a mid-sized but fast-growing company working on predictive behavioral models. He joined their Seattle team in 2021. He didn't own a car. Took the bus. Wore the same black sneakers every day. Had a Spotify playlist called Code Until It Hurts. And that was Joshua Miller. Except for one detail. He had been seeing Madeline Reyes for the better part of a year. A complicated relationship. According to colleagues and mutual friends, the relationship was ambiguous. Not quite official, not quite secret. They met at a tech networking event and bonded over obscure programming languages and sarcastic memes about GPU shortages. He never said they were dating, said Reena Patel, a DevOps engineer at Novix. But he also never talked about anyone else. And we all saw them together, especially on late nights when they were debugging together on Slack. Madeline, on the other hand, was far more enigmatic. She worked remotely for a cybersecurity firm based in San Jose, lived alone in Bellevue, and rarely showed up in social gatherings. Her Instagram, which once displayed food photos and scenic rooftop shots, had turned private months earlier. No one really knew her. And that was the point. She was precise, said Reena. Not cold. Just exact. Like someone who had practiced how to be casual. Silence after the crash. What shocked everyone wasn't the accident itself. It was Madeline's silence. She was the only one alive at the scene. She knew who Joshua was. She had his phone, his ID, his wallet. She was in the car with him. And yet, for 5 full days, she never spoke his name. Police reports confirmed that she had refused to provide the identity of the passenger when questioned at the hospital. Even when asked whether she was traveling with someone, she responded only with, "I'd like to speak to a lawyer." It was a legal right, but it also became the first thread that unraveled trust. Because while Joshua's family was still unaware that their son had died, Madeline, according to digital forensics, had accessed social platforms, exchanged money in encrypted chat apps, and had removed tagged photos of the two of them. She was sanitizing her online presence. Grief delayed, then rewritten. When Sandra Miller received her son's belongings, mailed 2 weeks after the crash, she opened the box with trembling hands. Inside, a pair of black-framed glasses, a worn-out laptop with a cracked hinge, a sweatshirt with a faint stain she didn't recognize, and a phone with no remaining battery. The contact labeled Maddie Speech Balloon had no recent messages. All threads were cleared. It was almost like someone had erased themselves from his life. Not just after his death, but before it. No obituary had been posted. No condolences sent. It was as if the world had moved on, and his name wasn't hers to mourn. A post that sparked the storm. On October 10th, 10 days after the crash, an anonymous Reddit user posted a thread in a Seattle true crime forum. Why hasn't anyone reported this yet? A Porsche crashed in Bellevue last week. 1 dead, 1 in hospital. But here's the weird thing. The girl who was driving hasn't posted anything, not even a condolence. She just updated her story drinking matcha. Someone died. And she's sipping tea. The post went viral in local circles. Dozens of screenshots followed, Madeline's previous posts, blurred pictures of her car, chat logs showing her exchanging foreign currency. Suddenly, Joshua wasn't just a victim. He became a question mark. A symbol of someone disappeared from memory before the body even cooled. And Madeline Reyes? She was no longer just the survivor. She became a suspect. And just like that, the tone of the investigation shifted. Detective Elijah Monroe didn't believe in coincidences. After 20 years in traffic investigations for the Bellevue Police Department, he'd seen more than his share of tragedies: drunk drivers, texting teens, mechanical failures, black ice. But this one didn't sit right. The car was a 2021 Porsche 911 Carrera S. Not the kind of machine that just loses control on dry pavement. It had stability systems, lane assist, traction control, features designed specifically to prevent what had happened that night. But there it was, flipped, crumpled, and thrown clear over a 6-foot-wide reservoir. So Monroe did what he always did. He started at the ground. A road that told its own story. The crash report came in detail by detail. Location: intersection of 108th Avenue Northeast and State Route 520. Time: between 3:43 a.m. and 3:46 a.m., based on nearby traffic cams. Weather: clear skies. Dry roads. Zero visibility obstructions. Speed limit: 30 miles per hour. But the car, according to tire mark analysis and onboard telematics recovered later, was traveling at 102 miles per hour. That's 164 kilometers per hour, on a surface road with residential spillover. The skid marks were long and clean. No jerking, no swerving. Just a hard brake, too late. Then, a veer to the left, a violent impact against the concrete barrier, and flight. The Porsche had left the ground. There was so much velocity, one forensics officer said, it skipped like a stone across water. Only, the landing didn't end in ripples. It ended in metal folding over bone. No other vehicle. No weather. No excuse. Most fatal crashes have an asterisk. Another driver, a glare of lights, a slick road. This one had none. There were no signs of pursuit. No deer crossing. No mechanical failure. The tires were intact before impact. The road was empty for minutes in both directions. All Monroe had were 2 people in a car. 1 dead. 1 silent. And it was the silence that began to matter more than anything else. Surveillance tapes don't lie. A pair of traffic cameras, one on 112th Avenue, the other at the turn onto 108th, captured the car moments before the crash. The footage was clear. Timestamp: 3:42 and 10 seconds a.m. The Porsche rolls past 112th at high speed. The digital readout puts it at 92 miles per hour. Timestamp: 3:43 a.m. The car enters the approach to Route 520. Timestamp, 3:43 and 20 seconds a.m. A blur. A flicker. Then nothing. 30 seconds later, the silence of the night is broken by smoke and broken glass. But here's what caught Monroe's eye. No brake lights until the very last stretch. It wasn't gradual deceleration. It was panic. And panic, to Monroe, meant realization. The medical report. Back at Harborview Medical Center, toxicology was in motion. Madeline Reyes's blood sample, taken under warrant, was processed by an independent forensics lab. The result wouldn't be officially published for another week, but an internal summary had already reached the prosecutor's desk. Blood alcohol concentration, 0.13%. The legal limit in Washington state is 0.08%. And yet, even after being confronted with this reality, Madeline said nothing. No apology. No acknowledgement. No name for the man who had died next to her. It wasn't just suspicious, it was cold. Prosecutors begin to circle. By October 5th, Detective Monroe filed a full accident responsibility identification report. In it he cited excessive speed, driving under the influence, failure to render complete information at the scene, negligence resulting in death. All elements of a vehicular homicide charge under Washington State Revised Code Section 46.61.520. Assistant District Attorney Linda Gates reviewed the report within hours. "This isn't just recklessness," she said aloud during a late-night meeting. "This is a pattern, a silence that is being used." And yet, they were too late. Because by the time the warrant was drafted, signed, and entered into the national system on October 9th, Madeline Reyes had already vanished. How did she slip away? This was the question that echoed through the police precinct like a bitter wind. She was severely injured. On oxygen. Bandaged from shoulder to wrist. Neck brace. Breathing assistance. She hadn't been mobile. She hadn't spoken to anyone. So how did she leave the hospital? The answer, as it turned out, was less cinematic and more bureaucratic. Because there was no warrant yet, the hospital had no legal obligation to inform police of her discharge. She left with help. Someone drove her out. Someone crossed the U.S.Canada border with her, no red flags triggered. And from Vancouver International Airport, she boarded a plane using her valid U.S. visa and passport. Final destination, Buenos Aires, Argentina. The person who helped her disappear? Still unknown. But whoever they are, Monroe made one promise. When we find them, driver, friend, accomplice, whatever, they won't just be facing a traffic charge. They'll be looking at obstruction. Harboring a fugitive. Maybe more. Madeline Reyes left more than broken glass behind her. She left a trail of omissions. A silence that screamed louder than any confession. And now? She was a fugitive. But not just from the law, from the truth itself. The camera footage begins with a faint hum, an audio calibration tone followed by the snap of a latex glove. October 2nd, 2023. 2:02 p.m. Harborview Medical Center, Emergency Ward, Room 316B. Detective Rafael Negrin adjusted the lens of his department-issued body camera and took a breath before entering the room. He had reviewed the crash footage. Read the preliminary toxicology. Memorize the accident reconstruction report down to the last foot-pound of kinetic force. But this was the moment that mattered most. Inside the room, the light was low. The curtains drawn. A rhythmic beep from the heart monitor marked the seconds like a metronome of guilt. A woman in ruin or calculation? Madeline Reyes lay on the hospital bed, her right arm in a full brace, wrapped in gauze from shoulder to wrist. A soft cervical collar held her neck in place. A clear nasal cannula threaded under her nose, hissing faintly. Her face was pale but focused. Eyes open. Alert. She turned slightly when Negrin entered, slowly but deliberately. A man, mid-30s, who had been sitting quietly near her bedside stood up. His presence hadn't been documented. He wasn't a relative. He wasn't a lawyer. "Who are you?" Negrin asked. Madeline spoke first. "Can he stay?" Negrin hesitated, then nodded. This is just a preliminary contact. We're not charging you with anything today. I just want to get a sense of what happened that night. She blinked, slowly. I'd prefer to have legal counsel before answering anything. Miranda in the emergency room. Negrin didn't push. He reached into his pocket and read the Miranda warning, per protocol. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. She nodded. Her hands never fidgeted. Her breathing remained steady. There were no tears. When asked if she would waive her rights and speak voluntarily, she said, clearly, no. I'd like a lawyer to handle this. It was her right. Legally protected. But emotionally? It felt like a brick wall. What the video doesn't say, but shows. The video clip, later reviewed by investigators and prosecutors, became a subject of debate, not for what was said, but for what it revealed. She was lucid, clear-headed, not confused or groggy. Her injuries were real, but not immobilizing. She declined pain medication before the visit, according to hospital records. She also asked for specific names of local defense attorneys, which surprised Negrin. She didn't want a public defender. She wanted someone experienced in vehicular cases. Someone familiar with traffic homicide, she whispered to the nurse after Negrin stepped out. This wasn't a woman who was still processing a tragedy. This was someone who already knew what she might be facing. Behind the curtain, the man who sat beside her remained unidentified for days. His ID wasn't recorded at entry. He left shortly after Negrin's visit and was never seen again. Some theorized he was a friend from the tech community. Others suggested he might have been the one who eventually helped her escape across the border. Either way, the detectives never found him. The hospital's security camera outside the ward was conveniently under maintenance that day. Coincidence? Detective Monroe didn't think so. No questions answered. Negrin left the room with the same notebook he entered with, empty. Not a single question answered. Not a single statement made. Just a quiet, intelligent woman wrapped in gauze and silence. And yet, in her refusal, there was something louder than words. She was preparing. Not for healing. Not for closure. But for strategy. The legal dominoes. That evening, prosecutors filed their formal request for a warrant. Based on the crash report, blood alcohol level, and Madeline's evasive behavior, they argued that she posed a flight risk. The judge reviewed the file and approved a $2 million bail with conditions. No driving. No passport use. No departure from Washington state. Electronic ankle monitor. Alcohol level monitoring. But by the time the clerk finalized the paperwork and the sheriff received it, Madeline was no longer at Harborview. No discharge record. No surveillance footage. No trace. Just a ghost in bandages and a man who vanished with her. The last footage. On October 4th, a toll booth camera near the U.S. Canada border caught a gray Honda CR-V exiting Interstate 5. The car matched the registry of a rental company used frequently by temporary tech workers in the Seattle area. The driver was a man. Alone. But a figure in the back seat, wearing a baseball cap and oversized hoodie, sat slouched across the bench. No plate match was made until October 13th, 4 days after the warrant had been issued. By then, Madeline Reyes was gone. Out of the country. Out of reach. In that hospital room, she had said only a handful of words. But they were enough. She would not confess. She would not mourn. She would not stay. If you'd asked anyone in the Bellevue precinct on October 2nd whether Madeline Reyes could escape, physically, legally, or even logistically, you'd get a unanimous answer. She had a fractured wrist. She was wearing a cervical collar. She needed help just to sit up in bed. She had no prior record, no travel history, no strong community ties. More importantly, there was no warrant yet. No posted charges. No reason to assume she was a flight risk. That would come a week later. And that 1 week was all she needed. The clock starts ticking. It's hard to say exactly when the escape began. Some say it started with the man in the hospital room. Others believe it began even earlier, when she first asked for a lawyer before answering any questions. Either way, here's what we now know. On October 4th, Just 2 days after the hospital interview, Madeline Reyes was discharged quietly from Harborview Medical Center. The hospital, bound by privacy laws and unaware of any warrant, had no obligation to inform law enforcement. No one from the police was assigned to watch her. She was just gone. The gray Honda CR-V. Surveillance footage from Everett, a city about 25 miles north of Seattle, shows a gray Honda CR-V pulling into a parking garage connected to a mid-rise apartment complex. The driver is male, wearing a cap. No clear identification. In the back seat, a woman, head tilted, hoodie pulled low, posture slouched. Timestamp, October 5, 11:08 p.m. The license plate matches a vehicle rented 2 days earlier using a temporary digital ID, possibly generated through a remote identity verification system. The car remains in the garage for 4 hours. It leaves again before dawn, this time heading north, toward the Canadian border. Across the border. At 7:42 a.m. on October 6, the same CR-V appears on I-5 North, just 10 minutes south of the Peace Arch border crossing between Washington and British Columbia. Border control cameras capture a close-up of the driver, same cap, same glasses, same neutral expression. The woman? Not clearly visible. Inside the car, no bags. Just 2 passengers, minimal gear. They are waved through. No flags. No alerts. No pending charges in the system. They enter Canada legally, without resistance. 3 hours later, a departure log from Vancouver International Airport shows a booking under the name Isabel Mora, a real person, but possibly an identity borrowed or replicated using falsified biometric data and a forged Argentine passport. The ticket? One-way. Destination, Buenos Aires, Argentina. The woman boards alone. Too late. On October 9th, prosecutors in King County file their motion for arrest. On October 10th, a judge signs the warrant for vehicular homicide, setting bail at $2 million. By October 11th, the warrant is entered into the National Law Enforcement Database. But by then, the trail has already gone cold. Detective Monroe receives the update via an internal email flagged urgent. Subject is no longer in the country. Likely departed via YVR on October 6th under alternate identity. Request international assistance through Interpol Red Notice. Awaiting federal coordination. The online firestorm. News of the disappearance didn't come from police. It came from the internet. A small but vocal subreddit called r/Seattle Mystery picked up the case based on traffic cam footage and local news leaks. Soon after, a Reddit post titled, "The Coder Who Crashed and Vanished," reached the front page of r/TrueCrime. She killed her boyfriend. Then drank matcha 2 days later. And now she's in another country. WTF? TikTok clips followed. Conspiracy theories. Video essays. Her professional past was dug up. A glowing internship at a Silicon Valley tech firm. Dean's List at Stanford. A GitHub page with advanced AI simulation code. She had been admired. Now she was hunted. A fugitive in disguise. Officially, the U.S. and Argentina do not have a bilateral extradition treaty in effect for all criminal categories. Vehicular homicide, especially if considered non-intentional, may not qualify for enforced repatriation. Unofficially, she became a ghost. No known address. No social media. No paper trail. But someone somewhere helped her get there. And that person was still on U.S. soil. Monroe's breakdown. Detective Monroe didn't like failure. He stood in the empty hospital room a week later, looking at the vacant bed, the creased bedsheets, the quiet four-stand. She had been here. And now she wasn't. Next time, he muttered, we put eyes on the patient. I don't care what the paperwork says. He would be quoted later in internal reports with one sentence that summed up the entire botched containment. We underestimated her because she was quiet. Madeline Reyes didn't run. She planned. She prepared. And then she walked out the front door while everyone was still printing the warrant. The moment the news broke, it wasn't from the police. It wasn't from any official press conference or attorney's statement. It was a TikTok clip. Just 12 seconds long. A screen recording showing an old photo of Madeline Reyes, smiling on a rooftop bar in Capitol Hill, sipping green tea. The caption read, "She killed her boyfriend, then disappeared. Here's what no one's saying." The clip exploded. By morning, #VanishingCoder had trended on X, formerly Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram. The outrage wasn't just about the crash. It was about what happened after. The silence, the digital trail, the social media deletion, and the tea. 2 days after the crash. On October 2nd, the same day she was interviewed at Harborview, Madeline updated her Instagram story. A single photo. It showed her kitchen counter, a mug of matcha, a paperback novel, Algorithms to Live By. The caption read, "Quiet mornings are the best." She posted nothing else. 2 days later, the story disappeared. A day after that, her profile went private. Within 48 hours, it was gone entirely. No photos, no comments, no bio, no trace she had ever existed online. Except, of course, to those who had been watching. Scrubbing a digital identity. Madeline Reyes wasn't just a software engineer. She specialized in data security. In college, she co-authored a research paper on structured deletion in cloud environments. She spoke at 2 tech conferences on the risks of residual metadata in social media platforms. She knew how to make things disappear properly. And now, she was applying it to herself. Investigators found that within 5 days of the crash, she had deleted 3 social media accounts, closed 2 crypto wallets, transferred USD into Chinese RMB and Argentine pesos through third-party WeChat agents, removed her GitHub contributions by deleting old forks, wiped her LinkedIn profile, but not before someone archived it. To the untrained eye, it looked like someone stepping back. To Monroe and Negrin, it looked like a ghost covering its footprints. The good girl illusion. That's what made it sting. Madeline wasn't a stereotype. She wasn't erratic or loud or attention-seeking. She was exactly the opposite. Well-dressed, well-spoken, gifted in math, polite in meetings, no criminal record, no past incidents, Stanford alumna, employed at a respected firm. She was the kind of woman parents pointed to and said, "See? That's what success looks like." And yet, she left a dead man in a crushed car, said nothing, lawyered up, and disappeared, all before anyone could stop her. The internet responded the only way it knew how. Trial by algorithm. Hundreds of YouTubers posted breakdown videos. Armchair detectives mapped out her digital disappearance, step by step. Twitter threads claimed they had seen her in cafes in Buenos Aires. Conspiracy theories spread. Some said she was a CIA plant. Others swore she faked the accident. A few believed she never existed at all. But the loudest voices belonged to Joshua Miller's friends. The post that broke through. On October 13th, Reena Patel, Josh's co-worker at Novix AI, posted a simple message on her private blog. He was kind. He waited for her to finish talking in every conversation. He once walked 2 miles back to the office because her car battery died. He didn't deserve silence. And now we have to scream for him. The post was shared over 20,000 times in 48 hours. It was featured in BuzzFeed, Vice, and NPR's true crime podcast Undercurrent. Suddenly, the case wasn't just about Madeline Reyes. It was about what society forgives in smart, quiet people with impressive resumes. About how easy it is to erase someone, even after killing them. The police stay quiet. The Bellevue Police Department released only one official statement. "We are working with federal and international agencies regarding the whereabouts of Ms. Reyes. This is an active fugitive investigation. Any tips can be submitted via our website or Crime Stoppers' anonymous line." Behind the scenes, though, they were frustrated. They had been outmaneuvered. By the time the warrant was issued, Madeline had already transferred funds, wiped her presence, and booked a one-way ticket across the globe. She had done in 6 days what most criminals couldn't do in 6 months. A pattern hidden in behavior. When analysts began to compare her online behavior before and after the crash, something disturbing emerged. Her posts dropped in frequency 2 weeks before the incident. She stopped responding to tagged photos. She pulled out of a Women in Tech panel scheduled for September 29th. Her calendar was cleared for October. It was almost as if she had known. Had she planned for something to happen? Or simply planned to escape if it did? There's no hard proof. No note. No search history. But the pattern was there. The intent? Impossible to know. But one thing was clear. She wasn't acting on impulse. She was executing a strategy. The justice system may have missed her. But the internet? It never forgets. The case of Madeline Reyes is technically open. There's an active arrest warrant in Washington state. There's a pending vehicular homicide charge, filed and stamped. Her passport has been flagged. An Interpol red notice is pending review. But in practical terms? The system has already lost her. She's somewhere in Argentina now, most likely under another name. The country does not maintain an extradition treaty with the United States for nonviolent crimes that aren't deemed high priority by both sides. And unless she voluntarily returns, there is no direct legal path to force her back. For all intents and purposes, she got away. A death without resolution. Joshua Miller's funeral was held on October 22nd in Dayton, Ohio. There was no body viewing. His parents couldn't bear it. His father said a few words. His mother couldn't. They received a single letter from the prosecutor's office, explaining the situation. We will continue to monitor all international travel logs and notify the family of any updates. But there haven't been any. Josh died instantly. He never saw it coming. And his family may never see justice. A system not designed for silence. Law enforcement wasn't unprepared. They weren't careless. They followed procedure. But what they didn't account for, what they almost never account for, was someone like Madeline. A woman with no criminal record. No financial red flags. No visible motive. Just an extraordinary ability to stay quiet and act quickly. She didn't run while sirens blared. She waited for the silence and moved in it. The last lead. There's still one name on the board in Detective Monroe's office. The unknown driver of the gray Honda CR-V. The man who helped her across the border. His face was partially captured on a toll booth camera. The license was fake, the rental details were traced to a shell account, and the credit card used was under a false name, but Monroe's team believes he's still inside the United States. And if they can find him, just him, then maybe this story doesn't have to end with silence. The moral debris. It's easy to say that this was just another accident. A drunk young woman made a mistake. She panicked. She ran. But the timeline tells a different story. She lawyered up before charges. She transferred money before being questioned. She erased herself before anyone thought to ask why. Mistakes are sudden. This was staged. When law ends and ethics begin. What happens when someone knows the system well enough to slip through it? What happens when a person's resume protects them, even after someone dies? What happens when justice stops at the border? These aren't just questions for law enforcement. They're questions for all of us. A quiet ending. Today, if you Google her name, you'll find conflicting results. Some articles say she's still wanted. Some say she died in the hospital, a rumor started by a fake obituary website. Some say she's hiding in rural Argentina. Others say she was spotted in Lisbon. There is no confirmation. There is no closure. Only silence. She said nothing. And then she disappeared. And maybe that's the loudest confession of all.